What is reality transurfing? Does it work? What are the major principles which underlie this concept, and how do we put them into practice in our daily life? Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please consider subscribing and clicking on the bell for notifications. This is the channel to learn about literature and life. Reality transurfing is the philosophical self-help system developed by the Russian writer Vadim Zeland. His two books, which best articulate the system, are Reality Transurfing Steps 1 through 5 and Transurfing in 78 Days, a practical course in creating your own reality. Overall, the concepts contained within reality transurfing are gracefully conceived and incredibly helpful. The shortcoming of Zeland's project might be that his specific sub-concepts, such as the mirror world, the variance space, excess potential, sectors, scripts, slides, and pendulums, all of these sub-concepts can be a little bit overwhelming and could perhaps be articulated just a little more clearly. To that end, the best way to understand the overall project of reality transurfing is to first of all digest what Zeland calls the mirror principle. Simply put, the mirror principle is the idea that manifestations in our physical reality originate on a mental plane. To be clear, Zeland is far from the first philosopher or writer to come up with this idea. In a broad sense, the roots of this concept go back to the father of all Western philosophy, Plato. So, before we get into Zeland's modern-day concept of the mirror principle, let's take a quick look at the precursor to this in Plato. The concept comes from one of Plato's most famous ideas, and one which eventually became the principle for the most important foundation of Western philosophy, eventually reaching its clearest expression in the 18th century German philosopher Immanuel Kant. In Plato's writings, this concept is known as the theory of forms. In essence, an ideal form is the perfect, abstract, and non-changing ethereal blueprint of something we see or know in the physical, like justice or beauty. As I said, the concept of ideal forms was one of the most important of all of Plato's ideas, and as such, it's bled down through the millennia into a great many other writers and philosophers. Vadim Zeland was probably influenced in his idea of the mirror world through the groundbreaking work of the 20th century physicist David Bohm. Bohm's 1980 work, Wholeness and the Implicate Order, argues that there is an unbroken wholeness in the non-physical realm from which physical reality is only a subset which we, as physical beings, perceive and interact with. To understand Bohm's theory, consider all of the physical universe, from planets and even galaxies to M&Ms and mosquitoes. All things, living and manufactured, all of this physical reality is a manifestation of a deeper realm which Bohm called the implicate order. Briefly, for Bohm, the physical world is unfolded from the subtler realm of non-physical reality of the implicate order. So, from Plato's ideal forms to Kant's a priori realm to Bohm's wholeness and the implicate order, we get Vadim Zeland's principle of the mirror world. In the mirror world, just like in Bohm's implicate and explicate orders, is the idea that everything in the universe exists first in an ethereal or non-physical realm. For Zeland, this non-physical realm is called the variance space. Think of the variance space as an almost inconceivably vast reservoir of information and potentiality which undergirds all human and physical possibilities. Is there a version of yourself that never broke up with your first girlfriend or boyfriend and ended up getting married at age 20? That possibility is in the variance space. Is there a version of your future where you achieve some long-held goal or intention? That future possibility also resides in the variance space. Zeland's explanation of the variance space is, frankly, tied to the concept of the multiverse. Just as in science fiction movies where there are unlimited possible manifestations of people and situations, so too does Zeland argue that our own potential for the future is infinitely varied. Our business is to identify the future variant of our possible realities and access the beginning of that future timeline. And this brings us into a clear understanding of the foundational principle of Zeland's philosophy, the mirror principle. So now that we understand that the concept of the ideal forms, the implicate order, we can consider what Zeland states about the mirror principle. In the introduction to his book, Transurfing in 78 Days, Zeland states that, quote, "The mirror divides the world into two halves, the actual and the imaginary. Everything that acquires material form resides in the actual half and unfolds in accordance with the laws of natural science," unquote. You'll notice that in this passage, Zeland specifically uses the word unfolds, which shows his indebtedness to the whole project of Bohm in Wholeness in the Implicate Order. Thus, for Zeland, the mirror world is the framework for understanding how objects, people, and physical reality unfold from the total non-physical realm of the variance space. The concepts from Zeland's reality transurfing can be of great value once you get past his sometimes tricky nomenclature. So in the mirror world, everything exists a priori in the variance space. Then, as something begins to form or manifest from a particular location in the matrix of the variance space, it is said to be the image. And then that image becomes manifest in physical reality as the reflection. So hopefully you understand now, Zeland is absolutely working from a very established framework that originated in Plato's dialogue Phaedo, found ultimate expression in Immanuel Kant, then became articulated in the lexicon of 20th century physicist David Bohm, and finally it's into a sort of physics meets philosophy meets New Age concept of Vadim Zeland. In short, for Zeland, the variance space is the ultimate infinite framework of all knowledge and all possibilities of all time, a sort of quantum soup of all the universe for all of infinity. Then a particular sector of the variance space is activated. He calls this the image, and then this manifests into physical form as Zeland's the reflection. This is the most important thing to understand of Zeland's The Mirror World, and it's just a little confusing, perhaps because of the translation from Russian into English. Just remember, the image comes first. Think of the image as a brief thought form of what you want the future to be like. Then, after a time delay, that image becomes the reflection in the mirror, or quite simply a manifestation into physical reality. Although Zeland's nomenclature and lexicon is mostly unique and original to him, he does occasionally reference this whole process in spiritual or even religious terms. So consider this statement, which is again from the introduction of his book, Reality Transurfing in 78 Days, quote, "Your thought forms act like an existing physical object that is standing in front of a mirror. Your reflection, which has no material substance, is imaginary, metaphysical, and at the same time as real as the form itself. Unlike the scenario with an ordinary mirror, in transurfing, the material world is the reflection. The images in it, which are served by the intention and the thoughts of God, as well as all living beings, are his manifestations," unquote. So this is a rare moment for Zeland, who is undoubtedly writing about spiritual concepts in his work, but here he distinctly says that the manifestations come from, quote, "the intentions and thoughts of God," although of course we notice that Zeland blends this into God as well as all living beings. So to paraphrase, we have the vast matrix of all potentiality in the universe, all energy, all forms of space and time, in utterly unimaginable non-physical realm, which he calls the variance space. From the vast, unlimited realm of the variance space, human thought activates one potential sequence of physical relations, which Zeland calls a sector of the variance space. Think of this sector being energized as the first moment of it becoming the image in the mirror. But remember, for Zeland, this image in the mirror is at first only mental, non-physical, or ethereal. In other words, it is coming from the non-physical world that David Bohm refers to as the implicate order. Then, after an unspecified time delay, the image in the mirror, which is primary, eventually becomes the reflection in the mirror, which is our physical world. This then is the spot where Zeland's writing is just a little bit muddled. It might be the English translation, but again, the image is the form that comes from the non-physical, and then after a time delay, it's manifested into physical form as the reflection in the mirror. So as long as we keep his terms clear, Zeland's entire philosophy becomes not only elegant, but more importantly, quite practical. Our thought forms activate a sector of the variant space. This is energized into the image, which then after a time delay becomes manifested into physical reality. Practically speaking, then, how is this helpful, and what do we do in order to help us live fuller, happier lives? Quite simply, remember that everything comes from thought form first. This is entirely helpful. As I pointed out, it's probably founded on the exquisite science philosophy of David Bohm. We remember that first and foremost, all changes and relationships in our lives are coming first from thought forms, then after a time delay into our physical reality. As I mentioned, Zeland's philosophy is quite elegant. One possible drawback is that Zeland is somewhat lacking in clear guidance on how to incorporate and use his beautiful theories. For starters, just remember that everything comes from thought first. Thus, before you undertake some bigger life decision, make sure that you are at peace with it. In many passages related to this, Zeland sounds a little Zen-like. He reminds readers to, in essence, be detached from the outcome. The term he uses for this is to avoid excess potential. Excess potential is one of his more original and brilliantly articulated concepts. What is excess potential? In brief, excess potential is when some goal or desire that we have is too emotionally charged for us to successfully pull it off. An easy example of this would be in dating or in a person's romantic life. So everybody knows if you're trying too hard on a date or in a social situation or in a case of flirting, if you're trying too hard, it's going to come off as needy, clingy, or simply put, cringe. In some ways, there's nothing you can do about it some of the time. If you're too impressed by some job or some potential relationship or situation, you'll definitely be anxious and you will have a tendency to screw it up. In Zeland's nomenclature, you would have excess potential. One way I've found to deal with this situation is to try to remember that you have no idea what the outcome of any situation will be. Even if you get some dream job, sleep with some amazing person, or find yourself in some amazing scenario, we all have to remember that everything is transitory. Even if you get the best job, even if you hook up with some perfect person, regardless, you're still going to wake up the next morning and want more. So, to take Zeland's idea of excess potential into consideration is to recognize, yes, it's proper and normal and even quite psychologically functional to want things, to desire things, to wish and expect for a better life, but try to keep a sort of bemused and relaxed attitude toward your goals and desires as you move toward them. Not only will this help them to manifest easier, it's also actually more rational. So think of someone who is wildly, insanely successful, some celebrity or somebody who's reached, great success in politics or business. People like Beyonce or Elon Musk or Taylor Swift or Barack Obama. All of those people have accomplished insane amounts of things. All of them, I assume, have wonderful and fulfilling lives. But nevertheless, despite of all their individual accomplishments, I'm sure that each one of them is met with constant setbacks and disappointments in their day-to-day lives. Put simply, no matter how much we have or accomplish, it seems to be human nature to just want more. But remember, this is helpful when we understand that even great accomplishments and succeeding at long-term goals is something that we don't have to feel anxiety about. We're better able to remain detached and move toward them. This, then, is the brilliance of Zeland's ideology. In the concept of the mirror world, we understand that thought forms and self-esteem and beliefs are our most important tools for a successful life. As we move towards our accomplishment, even in small steps, we keep in mind that even when we do accomplish them, we're going to continue to want more. This helps us to remain detached and to lose excess potential and not get overly concerned with the time delay between the original image in the mental non-physical realm and the manifested form in our physical reality. One other item is of great importance to understanding Zeland's system and putting it into practice. This is the simple notion that we cannot judge other people and situations. Now, while it's quite normal to evaluate a situation and see where and how we want to proceed according to our own plans and our own intuition, it's incredibly important that we do not judge others. If you're wasting your time getting involved in some petty little arguments on Twitter, if you're judging and condemning the lifestyle of other people, if you're overly concerned about the path and route that other people are taking in their life's journey, then in all of these cases, you're diminishing your attention to your own thoughts and mental habits. Your judgment and preoccupation with others will derail your own efforts and intentions every single time. To quote Zeland again, this is again from the introduction to Transurfing in 78 Days, all it really takes is to fulfill the basic rule of transurfing. Give yourself permission to be yourself and allow others to be different. The first step in putting Zeland's philosophy to work for you is simple and twofold. Remember, primarily, that all manifestations of situations and people originate in the subtle, non-physical, implicate order first. Secondly, greatly reduce the amount and tenor of your judgments of others. Learn first to simply observe your mind and how you are habitually reacting to yourself and others. As you begin to shift from judge and critic to a Zen-like observer mode, you allow life itself to unfold in all of its fabulously natural beauty. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel, and please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing for more videos on literature and life.